Okay, let's get this going over here. So, what is this video about specifically? This video is about the new tactics that are being used by the quasi investigators slash police that work with the USDA when it comes to food stamps. Now, a lot of you are like, what do you mean these individuals exist that are police? They are agents, they are investigators. What do you mean? So the thing is, the USDA has their own Office of Inspector General, but they don't have traditional CDI units. They do have investigators, both at the federal level and then also their state and county-based investigators as well that all work together with them. One of the things you have to keep in mind is that these investigators are very focused on audits. They're very focused on data science that they have, and they're trying to figure out where some of the most abhorrent terrible, absolutely ridiculous fraud is when it comes to food stamps. Now, just to be clear, it's under 7 CFR Part 2610 if you want to look them up. But the basic thing that you have to understand about this is that they have these special agents, and they're sworn under federal law enforcement. They are armed. They do have arrest powers. They have all that stuff. And one of the big things you have to keep in mind is that they do have this special investigation unit that goes and tries to figure out who's being a bad food stamper. Now, I want to give you some quotes so you understand kind of what's going on in the world of food stamps right now so that there's no confusion about how bad things actually are. Here's a quote. It's from the USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins discussing fraud detection. It's made November 4th, 2025. Quote, "We have found thousands and thousands of illegal use of the EBT card. We've been moving people off of SNAP. We've got almost 700,000 people. I think we've moved off just since the president took office. We've arrested about 118 people." And that basically was a direct quote specifically about those who are illegal immigrants improperly using food stamp benefits. Obviously, Biden's term was a very big boost for immigrants to come to this country. Many of them came here illegally. Many of them were able to get food stamps, and the working class paid for them. Now, remember, there's been a shift from the, Biden era to the Trump era. In the Biden era, immigrants and impoverished were basically, they were the victims. They were the ones that, if we had to bend the law, wiggle the law, go outside the law a little bit, they were given the benefit of the doubt. But in the Trump era, the working class is considered the victims. Okay. So they're the ones who are paying all this money to people who basically are not supposed to be receiving it. Ergo, now in the Trump era, the working class are the victims. Another quote. This is from the USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins. It's a variant from the same interview, November 4th. Okay. "We have found thousands and thousands of people. I think we've moved off just since the president took office. We've arrested about 118 people." And then here's another one. Katie Roof, food policy expert, critiquing Rollins. Quote, "If they're only arresting a little over 100 people, then clearly a lot of those 700,000 people are not committing fraud. Quote, "They are probably people being removed from the rolls because of recent legislative changes." Okay, so here's and then a response. Quote, "Under the second Trump administration," this is from Secretary Rollins again, "the USDA launched an investigation into SNAP fraud and abuse, which Rollins said led to dozens of arrests and people going to jail over the past 6 months." Another quote, this was on November 20th, 2025. So like really recent, this is like from today. This is literally a quote from today. "These fraudulent claims and transactions cost the government more than $102 million in the first quarter of fiscal year 2025. As a result of these issues, Rollins said the department has made," and it's the end of the quote, "hundreds of arrests in regard to the fraudulent claims for SNAP benefits." Now, here's kind of the bottom line. They're not arresting a ton of people yet because it takes time to build the claim. It takes time to figure out what's going on, so on and so forth. Which brings me to my next point of what are the tools being used to find all these abusers? Now, I want to just point out, never before have the police had such active and incredible artificial intelligence programs that can massively wide search essentially all of the information that's out there. So when it comes to people who are getting food stamps in multiple states, basically people claiming to be parents that aren't actually parents, there's all kinds of categories of people who are getting benefits that are not supposed to be getting benefits. you're going to see a lot of people get arrested in the not too distant future. You're going to see a massive amount of fraud coming out of these Office of Inspector General divisions. Here are the specific tactics that they're using. And then obviously, remember, with artificial intelligence, it boosts it. Now, at the end of the day, I want you to keep something in mind. All of you, for the most part, have like a Facebook account or a YouTube account or a something else. That's kind of like your personal online digital identification as to who you are based off of what you've created. Well, the government has their own version of that. And their own version of that is basically where they identify you based on a specific number with anything they could find and scan off the internet that goes into your profile. Food stampers have this just the same. And as a result, they're able to use this information to figure out if people should actually receive their food stamps or whether they should not receive them. Real quick, AAP Services, very, very cool. I want to go ahead and do a big shout out to the $10 donation, a big heart there. Said, because you earned it. I super appreciate it. That's absolutely amazing. I love the, very nice with the salute. Very good. I appreciate it. That's excellent. So thank you. That is amazing. I super appreciate that. We do get a lot of the gear going because in the near future you're going to see this studio. The Buso desks have not arrived yet, but they're going to be here soon. So here's the thing: the big tactic that they usually use at the beginning would be data analytics and EBT transaction monitoring. So think of it this way. You've got advanced analysis of basically EBT transactions, data that can flag suspicious patterns, such as unusually high volume or rapid transactions, maybe large dollar amounts inconsistent with store inventory, or repeated credits or debits indicating cash exchanges. So in other words, they know how to profile those individuals who are receiving EBT cards. What they can also do is compare that against the expected lifestyle of a person of a particular race, of a particular gender, of a particular religion, in a particular geographic area, living in a particular type of house, living as close or far from a particular, could be a food shop, could be a Walmart, could be a local, small thing on the corner of some, city, could be some place, where you have to go shop for food that's way far away. So it's one of those gigs, just to be clear, where basically they can create profiles that are very accurate about the expectations of how you will spend those EBT funds. Because one thing is certain, EBT funds are usually not used, or almost never used, for investments, meaning they put it aside or put it into something. It's used as an immediate compensation to purchase food. And when they get to know how you are, when they get to know what you buy, they get to know very, very well how you will react in the future. So if they notice that all of a sudden, bottom line, you're starting to spend a bit differently. If they notice all of a sudden, bottom line, that funds are being used a bit differently, you will get flagged. Here's the number one group that I foresee losing a lot of food stamps, which isn't good because they need some sort of counseling and therapy and stuff like that. But the number one group I foresee losing food stamps are a lot of the people, and I represent quite a few of them, who basically take their food stamps and sell them to other people. Here's why. When you sell your food stamps, let's say at a 50% conversion rate. So let's say you've got $200 on a card, they give you $100, yada, yada, yada. When you sell your food stamps, okay, they are now using more and more technologies, including phone, when you're doing text messaging, phone calls, when they're doing things related to security image reproduction, when they can go to a store and say, we believe there's food stamp fraud going on. Can we see your security footage of who used that card on this date at this time in front of that camera? You will see that there's going to be a lot of new things going on with people basically selling their food stamp cards, getting picked up by these investigators from the local law enforcement, the state law enforcement, and then, of course, sometimes the federal law enforcement. Here's why this is important. The problem is that a lot of people sell their food stamps to then thereafter purchase drugs or alcohol or whatever. And the issue now is that, that $100 that they used to be able to get, that could buy a certain amount of what they're traditionally hooked on. And then they would just go to the local, homeless help facility, pick up food and eat that food instead of what they would use their EBT card for. One thing you need to keep in mind is that these local clinics, these local homeless help facilities are almost always funded by the government in some way. Sometimes they're funded at the county level. Sometimes they're funded at the state level. Sometimes they're funded at the federal level. And then sometimes they literally have funding from all different levels. What you have to realize is that they have lots and lots of security camera systems set up. And those images can be used to capture information. And that information can then be put into your online digital profile system. And why this is important? It's important because at the end of the day, what ultimately happens is that they're able to build up a schematic on what you're doing when using homeless help assistance. Now, look, clothing is very expensive, right? Food is very expensive, okay? Bidenomics was bad for most people, but it was especially bad for the poor, especially bad for the impoverished. Real quick, I want to do a shout out to Pug 2005. Thank you, Diana, for the $5 donation. That's absolutely amazing. Look at this. Here we go. Good to see you there. Diana's been with us one of the longest. We super appreciate seeing her. Another one from Devil Stopper 64-65, $5 donation. Long time. Oh, it's old school truck driver. Thank you for helping. Super thank you. Big heart out to you. I super appreciate that. Excellent. Old school truck driver. You got to let us know what your top 5 trucks are. I am preferential towards the, I would say 1948 to 1952 Chevy. I tend to like the, I'm okay with the step side 5-window. I like the extended bed though, because I grew up on a farm. But anyways, let me know what your thoughts are on that. Now, here's what you need to know. As a result, these local facilities, you are accessing a government program to get this extra food, to get these extra resources. So what's going to happen is you're going to be part of a network of review where these facilities will be able to hand over digital information to the federal government who's doing investigations to see what you are getting from homeless help facilities. Okay. Now, why is this important? It's important because America has a dwindling middle class. What do I mean? So the big thing is the middle class has been kind of propped up to pay for a lot of the stuff. And the middle class is shrinking because there's not enough jobs. A, AI is replacing the jobs that do exist. B, a lot of people are having children that aren't really becoming hyper successful. And to be fair, a lot of people aren't having children, right? How many kids do I have? Well, I have 2 chubby dogs. So I'm part of the problem, just like a lot of the other millennials and younger. And so at the end of the day, the issue is we're not making enough human beings to replace the middle class that was part of the older Gen X boomers. And as a result of this, we're running into a problem. We don't have enough middle class people working a regular job, paying regular taxes to keep everything going in the same direction. Because remember, the middle class, the upper class, and the super rich pay for all of the poor. The middle class kind of gets screwed over in that regard, but when have they not? All right, so next thing. So there's this group, right? FNS and OIG. They use algorithms to identify high-risk retailers, also high-risk food stamp recipients, where there's patterns of likely excessive round dollar transactions or benefits redeemed far from recipients' homes which trigger these investigations. And so they use IT to basically counter and reverse engineer the schemes that people are using. The classic scheme that people use is that they'll go to a store and the store will be known for violating some food stamp rules and regulations. They'll buy some bigger ticket items that they're not actually purchasing, and then basically they get cash back. These types of situations are very common. There's an entire background of it going on in America. It's usually for people to go ahead and get cash out of their card to go buy whatever they want, whether it's alcohol, drugs, or blah, blah, blah. Now, here's the thing. That's not going to work so well in the future because in the future, we are likely to see food stamp cards having more restrictions on them. What do I mean? I mean that they're going to be more chip-related transactions for specific items that are logged in a very specific way. What do I mean? The cards could have future technology put into them that has basically, the ability to figure out who's actually holding the card. So for example, as you know, on most modern laptops, you have an area on the laptop where you put your finger, which then allows you to access certain things or input your password or whatever. It is likely that food stamp cards in the future will have that notification. Now you'll be thinking, wow, that's a big security upgrade. Wow, why do they really need that? Well, they need it because when you go ahead and use the card and use your fingerprint on that card, they now have specifically whatever they need to legally say you were the criminal. It's no longer you giving your card to somebody else and that other person committing the crime on top of the crime of you giving them your food stamp card. Now it's you with proof of your finger on the food stamp card essentially doing the wrong thing. So now they've got good proof it was you at that moment with your fingerprint on that food stamp card to authorize the specific transaction. Next thing they do a lot of is undercover investigations and sting operations. So investigators pose, as anything. They could pose as a store owner, they could pose as a customer, they could pose as a somebody who's testing out a product, somebody who's, basically parking their car and trying to refuel their vehicle, anything and everything. They could pose as a package delivery person. So what happens is they coordinate these raids on food stamp recipients because they're trying to go ahead and figure out who's actually abusing and using. So a lot of these mom and pop stores that would play these food stamp games when it comes to, hey, buy this and I'll give you this much back in cash. The bottom line is a lot of that stuff is going to be running into issues in the future. And remember, the most likely area that you're going to be seeing this first are poverty areas. So like if you look at Florida, think Bithlo. If you look at Florida, think Pine Hills. Those types of areas are most likely to see the most crackdowns when it comes to actual investigators hanging out and doing sting operations. But again, you have FNS via the OIG who are doing these thousands of undercover probes to figure out essentially what's going on. And remember, they have multi-agency stings. They have the FBI working with them and all kinds of things. They're surveilling hundreds and hundreds of locations in California alone. They have targeted skimming devices that lead to essentially arrests, seizures of your cards, seizures of your person, etc. Another thing that they're going to be increasing the use of would be the tip hotlines for the public and basically anonymous reporting. So let me give you an understanding of that. One of the things that pisses off a lot of the middle class is that the middle class has to go to work. And the food stamp recipients, well, some of them should go to work, but don't go to work. Some of them are disabled and can't work. The next video we're literally going to do is about all the things Trump is going to be doing to try and increase the likelihood that people go ahead and get back to work, even if they're already on food stamps. But the bottom line is there are quite a few people receiving food stamps who really should not be receiving food stamps. And as a result, you can imagine that pisses off the middle class who has to wake up every morning, go to work, come home, and then live their life, which is very little time before they have to go to sleep and wake up again the next day. So I believe that we're going to be seeing more and more of the middle class turning in the food stampers. However, there's a caveat to this. A lot of the middle class rely on food stamps given to their family members who are not out there working. Now, some of you come from perfect, amazing, wonderful families where everybody works hard and there's no problems at all and everybody's nice to each other. Or you live in reality where there's no unicorns. And the bottom line is that there's a family member who doesn't do what they're supposed to do. Maybe they're disabled, maybe they're not. And, maybe they could get a job, maybe they can't. But the bottom line is nobody's really trying to push them to go get a job, because they've tried 30 times before. That family of middle classers that are working rely on those food stamps to be paid to that family member who's not able to do stuff. As a result of that, it creates a dilemma where if that family member loses that food stamp check, they no longer have the food stamps to pay for that person who's not working in that household of a bunch of middle class people. Also, keep in mind how the family is defined. When the Republicans are in, they almost always try to change the definition of a family, change the definition of who's in the house and who can receive food stamps as a result. Now, let's talk about interrogations. Let's talk about interagency collaboration and joint task force. Well, let's do the agencies that are working together, okay? So basically, the FBI, the Secret Service, the DHS, local law enforcement, state law enforcement, intelligence sharing, warrant sharing, prosecutions. What you're likely to see in the not too distant future is a lot more work when it comes to, and you're not going to like this, basically interviewing people to catch fraudsters. Okay, what do I mean by that? I expect Trump to be putting in programs that allow people who have been arrested to basically snark on other people who are abusing food stamps. What do I mean? Trump's sitting there saying, how do I get the statistics to show that there's massive food stamp fraud? How do I get this? Because then it proves that we've done an amazing job to go ahead and help the middle class. That's what he's got to do. He can do that by going to prisoners who are in jail, prisoners who are in prison. Obviously, prisoners, prison. But the bottom line is he can go to them and say, do you have information? If it is credible, we might be able to work a deal to reduce the amount of time you have in this jail or prison cell. That's an important factor. And remember, this is going to be across the entire spectrum with the FBI, Secret Service, DHS, state, local, county, etc., law enforcement. And so what you have to keep in mind is that they're going to be looking to essentially figure out where are the crime rings, what's happening with the skimming, what's happening with cloned cards, what's happening with the POS terminals, what's happening with the fraudulent retailers, what's happening with, basically local law enforcement dealing with those things. Because remember, law enforcement, especially local ones, a lot of them don't end up doing what their job is supposed to be. And then ultimately they get arrested too. Now, another thing, inspections. I expect there to be inspections more aggressively in the future. So let me go through that. A lot of stores, they keep a rolling inventory, sheet on site. Some of them are digital, some of them are paper. It's about stock. How much stock do they have a certain item? How much stock do they not have a certain item? And how much they have to buy going forward? I believe that they are going to be doing a lot more unannounced store visits, store investigations, stock verification procedures, where they basically go to stores and say, okay, we see you have this many sodas, we see you have this many sandwiches, we see you have this many candy bars. Well, it looks like from our records that there should be a 30% reduction in the amount that you actually have from EBTers buying this, buying these products. Ergo, what's going on? Now, to be clear, I think what you have to understand is that these small convenience stores, when it comes to redeeming a lot of the potential funds and charging things, they are the area where you're going to be seeing a shitstorm of basically charges being brought. Now, fraudulent applications, being submitted. I think what's already happening is just going to continue to happen with that whole situation. They're going to keep training the USDA employees to basically go ahead and review, see what they can pull from it, look at license numbers, look at basically smoke shops, processing, all these things for people who are going in there to go ahead and purchase. They'll probably look at whether or not people should be given a snack or a treat, like whether or not they can get, sodas going forward. I think what will happen is that, to be fair, a lot of the people who are filing for food stamps, you're going to see increased amounts of fraud of people claiming that they tried to work, and increased amounts of fraud when it comes to the local facilities trying to go ahead and make some money off of the food stamps illegally. At the end of the day, though, I think that there's going to be a very big cultural change when it comes to things like cigarettes, cultural change when it comes to alcohol, cultural change when it comes to hookah, digital cigarettes or e-cigs. I think there's going to be a very, very big change when it comes to this because, to be fair, at the end of the day, food stamps are meant to be a program that serves a purpose. If it's not serving the purpose, they got to figure out a way to make it serve that purpose. Next one. Then you will see, essentially, in my opinion, likely more specific things where the card can only be linked to that person. So what they're worried about is, essentially, let's say that somebody gets a food stamp card and then the food stamp card goes to some dealer, right? Like a trafficking situation where you have a bunch of people who are trafficked. They take the food stamp cards, they give them to the dealers, and the dealers go buy things or pull the funds. And then those people who are trafficked, have to live in a certain low level of whatever. I think what's going to happen in the future, you're going to be seeing a very active FBI, very active Border Patrol that's going to be finding a lot of these individuals who are abusing children and doing terrible things. Why is this important? You may notice that all of a sudden there are a lot more news articles coming out about all these children that they're saving, all these, people that are now getting out of being trafficked, etc. My whole thing here is that food stamps are not a lot of money, but they do ultimately add up to quite a bit of money. And it is one of those things where I think Trump is looking to how he can use food stamps to bolster the likelihood of a successful midterm period. Why do I say that? With the midterms, okay, The voting group that he's got to please the most are the middle class workers. The wealthy people that are not Democrats, because remember, there's only so many super rich that support the Democrats. It's a limited group. It's not as vast as most people think. Most wealthy people, most investors are clearly and obviously Republicans. Selling to investors that you have to constantly tax them more so that you have a cleaner city. That's investors look at that and they go, how the hell is my government this shitty to let my city get this bad with me paying this much money? Investors don't live in that world where they're like, yeah, let me pay another, $5 million of my earnings in taxes to a city to help clean it up even more when they can't clean it up with all the money they're already getting. That's not how smart financial people think. Smart financial people are used to running their own companies. They're used to running their own investments at a highly efficient level. The governments are not ever at a super highly efficient level compared to those super investors because, they don't have the talent. They don't have the talent of some brilliant minds figuring out how to constantly make a better wheel, right? So at the end of the day, most of these investors tend to be Republicans. And you might argue with that, but it just is what it is. It is my opinion that the middle class who have jobs from those investors are very, very likely to want to go ahead and vote for Trump if they see that a lot of the fraud and abuse is being cleaned up. Why is this important? Okay. At the end of the day, one of the things you have to kind of keep in mind is that the middle class is a new middle class. Middle class is not a lot of boomers in the sense of the, usual system. The middle class is a lot of people who are basically constantly trying to get out of the hole that they're in. When we had Obama, a lot of the middle class didn't do so well. Then we had Trump. Things were going good, and then COVID hit. Everything went to shit. Then we got Biden. Everything was the worst it's ever been. Then we got Trump again. So you got a lot of hungry middle classers who are millennials, Gen Xers, who are Gen Zers, who are trying to figure out if they're ever going to be able to afford a house, nice car, a car that's not a used car that's broken and, beat the hell up. You got a lot of people who are basically in this constant anxiety state of not being able to afford things. And those people, just to be clear, want revenge. They want vengeance because they feel like with all these illegal immigrants, with all these other immigrants that are legally here, with all the food stamp recipients, the poor, etc., they feel very strongly at the end of the day that they shouldn't be paying for all this. And now you can't really blame. I mean, imagine, let's say a 35-year-old millennial can't afford a house, has been working nonstop, makes $45,000 to $50,000 a year, is stuck in the rental game, is stuck with a car that's constantly breaking, can't get ahead, credit cards are building, and they're working already at max capacity, and they're still getting into debt. And remember, their student loans come every month. What you have are a lot of people who are pissed. They're pissed at the politicians and they're pissed at the poor because a lot of these people in the Gen Z, the millennial and the Gen X, they blame the poor for taking too much of their taxes that could be used to go get a house, that could be used to go buy a better car. And they're not wrong. They're not wrong. Like, some of you are saying these people, the working class must pay for my children. The working class must pay for my benefits. The working class must pay for my food, yada, yada. You might be that person, and that's fine. I see your side of it too. If they're not paying for it, then you're going to, you're going to be in a horrible, horrible situation. So I get it too. But remember, the middle class is in revenge mode, and they're in revenge mode because they don't have enough money to do the stuff they want to. What do I mean? The poor need to be better at looking to see how the middle class can do better. Why? The poor normally don't give a shit about the middle class. Why would they? That's not even in their pay grade of giving a shit, right? Who cares? If the poor were smarter about watching what's happening with the middle class, that would dictate how well the middle class is willing to treat the poor. The poor don't usually think about that. So at the end of the day, you got the middle class not going on vacations, not being able to afford better gifts for their children, not being able to afford a nicer, area to live in, not being able to go and live in the suburbs away from the dangerous cities and blah, blah, blah. And so the middle class is pissed. They're in revenge mode. They're not happy. It is it's not a good gig. And to be fair, and I think 76 Mothers of Invention has a good point. A lot of people were sold a 4-year degree that really didn't equate to a useful thing for them. So at the end of the day, people to some degree are pissed, right? And they can't afford to pay back this 4-year degree, and then they got additional things on top of it, and here we go. So the point I'm getting at with this whole situation is that a lot of legislation that's going to be coming out in the future related to food stamps is built to appease the middle class who want revenge against the poor class who are basically receiving all of this middle class tax money, which is then being paid to people. There's quite a few people who live in who basically have food stamp cards from multiple states. There's quite a people who have food stamp cards basically and using and abusing the Social Security number. So you have to understand, Trump is designing specifically an attack on food stamps that's going to make the middle class happy so that the midterms go in the direction of his voting. That's the direction with this, okay? Now, let me give you some basic things that you should consider. So bottom line is that it looks like, okay, so let's say that there was overpayments, underpayments, errors, fraud, skimming issues, trafficking issues. From the GAO USDA 2024 statistics, it looks like around 11.7%. That's around 10.5 billion of 90.1 billion in benefits were improper payment rates. And that was via the 2023 to going into 2024 statistics. That was core metrics from OIG from the oversight when they were doing the review. Another thing is that 102 million, so basically EBT benefit theft skimming losses, there's 102 million, so it's 226,000 claims, 691,000 fraudulent transactions where basically cards were reported stolen, replaced, up from 69.4 million in the prior quarter. And, basically OIG's, oversight committee is going, holy shit, this is pretty bad. Now, remember, the Biden era, Biden wanted to have food stamps set up to go to lots of different people because, the Democrats were basically creating a system of vote farming. So they had any agency they could pay for anything that they could to have all of these potential legal and illegal immigrants ultimately become naturalized and then ultimately vote for the Democrats. It was a brilliant plan. It just went to shit because Trump got in. That's the reality. Another thing, it looks like fraudulent SNAP transactions have been increasing, a total of 55% from 444,553 to 691,604 transactions from quarter 4 of fiscal year 2024. So the end of 2024 to quarter 1 of fiscal year 2025, which was the largest quarterly spike on record via the USDA FNS. So, just to be clear, things were going in the wrong direction, and Trump is now starting to really turn them around. Another thing to keep in mind is that they have the estimated annual retailer trafficking rate, which is basically where there was intentional retailer recipient cash exchanges. You know how that works. They give them the card, they give them cash in exchange. From a 2015 to 2017 study that was referenced in 2025 analysis, there was a 1.3 to 1.6%, which totals 1.27 to 1.3 billion annual based issue when it comes to this whole retailer recipient cash exchange. And so, to be fair, the fraud is rampant. The fraud is rampant. It's there. It's not good. They had data sharing from 29 states, including deceased, duplicates. Basically ineligible recipients were removed. There's about 700,000 individuals that they're claiming that were pulled off. I mean, we have to see more metrics on the specifics of that. But I mean, to be clear, that's a lot of people. Now, additionally, just to keep in mind, the program is bursting at the seams. There's like 41.7 million, actual, people receiving these stamps. That's 12.3% of the US population. And I just want to point out one thing, okay? Everybody's like, capitalism can save everything. Yeah, well, look at this food stamp situation. If you have that many people on food stamps, that means capitalism is failing. And let me point something else out to you. If artificial intelligence starts taking over jobs at the fast rate that they're saying it is going to, which I believe them, you're going to see a lot of low-level white-collar, low-level blue-collar people getting replaced when it comes to jobs very quickly who are going to end up on food stamps. So you're going to be seeing a lot of people who normally have a job not being able to get a job because their knowledge base isn't high enough to find a place, where these AI programs are slowly going to take over each level of doing a particular corporation. Okay. Now, keep in mind, they're saying that there's about somewhere between 186,000 to 300,000 potential instances where there's deceased individuals still enrolled. They were flagged in 2025. They have basically about 500,000 instances of duplicate multi-state recipients flagged. So there's going to be a shitload of people arrested in the future on that one. Like that's easy pickings for these investigators. Like when somebody's receiving benefits in one state and another state, that's easy pickings for that situation. And then, of course, reported stolen benefits. They're looking around 320 to 349 million, which is the first half of 2025 estimates, including unreplaced. Now you're looking at cloning thefts, skimming thefts higher than the official replacement rate. So there's a problem. There is a massive, unbelievable problem with this entire situation. But once again, I need you to understand they are going to be ramping up essentially who they have in place to actually get investigators to review and find this food stamp fraud, because Trump needs to have statistics that show he found a ton of fraud to please the middle class, to have the middle class vote for his people during the midterm elections. Okay. I'm going to give you my final thought in a second, but first, please remember to like and subscribe. Also, head over and give a call to Medicare Help. I don't do Medicare questions. So if you have any questions, please call askchapter.org/disability. That's the URL link at 339-226-6287. I don't do Medicare stuff. They do. They can do a tune-up on your Medicare, get you a Medicare Advantage plan, things like that. All right, here's my point with this entire situation. We have the Democrats being quasi-quiet for the most part after this whole debacle, which they didn't really end up in the driver's seat. And then obviously Trump really put them in the back seat when it comes to reopening the government. Food stamps were not a thing that the Republicans were loving. In fact, they used it as a thing to punish the poor, to go ahead and try and have the Democrats, bend a knee to Trump. Ultimately, Trump didn't need Schumer to bend a knee. He found other people to just vote for what he wanted. You have the end of January coming up. You are going to see fireworks when it comes to food stamps once again. Yes, there will be contingency funds, but in my belief, I do believe that there will be another government shutdown, that there will be another food stamp crisis at the end of January going into February. I do believe that there will not be enough contingency funds put aside, except that actual shutdown might last longer. That might last 2 months. Here's why. The Democrats don't have enough teeth right now to bite into the situation to get a good outcome. Why? The Democrats don't have something that's really getting them going in the right direction. In fact, this whole Epstein list just came out, and I'm starting to look at the numbers between the Democrats and the Republicans, and it looks like there's quite a few Democrats that did some illegal things, especially with communications to Epstein, during the whole situation. So the whole release, the Epstein list, is not going in their direction. The Democrats need to find something that will get them a better chance going into the midterms. They're just not lined up properly. They don't have a common cause. And there are two main groups that they're fighting for, which is, of course, the LGBTQ plus community and the Islam, community, are both against each other, right? You can't have a group that supports those two groups and have it make sense. Make it make sense. It can't make sense. One group is specifically, it is in their religion against the other group. And the other group, you've seen the marches, you've seen what's going on, what's happening. So the Democrats need to revitalize their approach to trying to get the middle class, the actual working class, to vote for them, because there are not enough of these smaller minority groups, groups like, for example, the LGBTQ plus community, groups like, for example, Haitians that are immigrants, groups, for example, that are part of, the Muslim-backed, groups, Muslim-backed religion. These groups are not enough people to get enough voters for the Democrats to make it make sense. So they've got to refigure out their way to do this. And while they might be doing things to try and get more and more food stampers in the direction of their votes, I think what's going to happen is during the Trump era, we're going to see more and more people on food stamps trying to find and ultimately finding a job, because the new legislation from the big beautiful bill requires them to go get a job to be able to have ... their food stamps. So it's going to be very, very, very interesting to see what happens. It is a bit of a shit show, to be honest with you. However, Trump is in the driving seat at the moment, but I never put it past Democrats to go ahead and come up with a brilliant Hollywood-like thing to, change the entire ideology about Trump. Because I remember when Trump left office last time, it was like he was, dragged behind the Roman, chariot out of the city with disgrace, But again, Trump is a magical, mythical thing. Nothing sticks to him. He's Teflon Don. I mean, that dude has done a lot of wrong and it's never stuck to him, but he seems to always end up on top. And people tell me, no, he's a felon. Yeah, well, he's also a felon in the White House. You know what I mean? So to be fair, stuff just doesn't seem to stick to him. Now, the next video we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about the changes that are coming likely in the future when it comes to Trump trying to get more disabled people to go ahead and work, thereby reducing the amount of people who are on disability benefits. Give me about 10 to 15 minutes. I will catch you a little bit later at that show. We're doing the videos right now as opposed to later because I'm super sick. I'm on medication. It's the best I'm going to feel in the middle of the day. And by tonight, I'll be basically, snot and phlegm all over the place, miserable. So I will catch you at the next video in about 10 to 15 minutes. Remember to hit that like button. So many of you have not hit that like button. Hit that like button. Also, please head over to Google, type in Disability Resolution Law Firm or Disability Resolution. Throw some stars up there. I'll catch you at the next video. And remember, Attorney Walter Hnot, that's me, the most viewed and subscribed to Disability Attorney in America. If you need a disability attorney, you can always give me a call. The phone number, it's in the bio area. And then finally, very important, please remember, if you need a special private consultation, mini consultations are free on Mondays and Thursdays. I've been sick though, where I go live. If you need a bigger one, 30 minutes or an hour, mini contract is below. I'll catch you a little bit later and we'll rock and roll from there. Attorney Walter Hnot, thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.